Hello everyone, I'm Rebecca Keppel. Today's video is another episode of my Get a Jump on Christmas series, and today I'm very excited because I get to share with you a whole bunch of the Stamp Market's latest Merry and Magical release. They were kind enough to send me a whole bunch of pattern paper, stamps, and dies so that I can share them with you and you can see them up close. As always, the colors and designs in this collection from the Stamp Market are absolutely amazing. So let's just flip through the pattern paper and then I'll share the rest of the new products as we go. So these are the Merry and Magical 6x8 pattern papers. You can see you get 2 sheets of tags that are absolutely amazing. You could use them on cards, on scrapbook layouts. You could also just put them right on presents. And then there are the 14 different designs, 2 sheets each, single-sided pattern papers. They are absolutely gorgeous. The colors range from traditional to fresh and modern. The patterns range from traditional to really graphic and fun. I mean, check out that fa la 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 paper. And then there are some beautiful pinks and salmons mixed into the bright reds and greens. I love the colors here. They make it really fun to create unique looking holiday cards. Okay, now it's time to make some cards. For this first card, we're going to combine the Fa La La clear background stamp, and we are going to also use it with the Jumbo Candy Cane dies, which comes with 2 dies, the base layer and then the stripe layer that you can adhere on top. You could cut out a bunch of those, stack them on top of each other to make a shaker as well. So I don't need to take out my foam mat out of my MISTI because it is a clear stamp, not a cling mounted stamp. I'm going to put my cardstock with a little bit of adhesive behind it right where I want it in the center of this stamp. So I am working right now on an A2 piece of white cardstock. It's got a little bit of adhesive behind it that is keeping it stuck on my MISTI mat there. I'm using the mouse pad. I'm going to heat emboss, so I'm using anti-static powder tool and brushing away the excess there, and I'm using the Stamp Market's Emboss Ink. I've had a couple of questions about it. I really like their Emboss Ink a lot. I feel like it gives you great details. With a large stamp like this, I do use the Stamper's Secret Debbie tool to get a really good impression for the first stamp. Now I'm just going to pour some silver embossing powder all over the top, shake off the excess, and then heat set the whole thing. Of course, with a large panel like this, it does take a little time. Just make sure you really heat up your heat tool so that you don't have to hold it onto the cardstock for too long. I decided I wanted to mat this on some of the pattern paper because it's so gorgeous. So I did cut it down to 4 by 5 1/4 and then matted it on some of that red and white pattern paper there, and then I used that same pattern paper to cut out the stripe layer of the candy cane, and I'm going to layer that on white cardstock. I cut some of the tags out, and they do have the little holes are in white, so it makes it really easy to put it inside a hole punch, and if you see white in the hole punch, you know you have it straight, and then just go ahead and punch. I love how they have the little colors of the pretend reinforcements on the pattern paper. So I wrap the twine around the panel, and then I'm going to figure out the placement of my tags, and after I tie a knot in the twine, I'm going to put the tags on one side of the twine's knot. Then I'm going to tie one more knot and then make a bow with the twine, and I just leave the tails for now because I don't know how I want it to look. I did put some foam tape behind the largest tag just so that it will stay where I want it, and you'll be able to see both tags and it will be dimensional as well. Use a little tape runner behind the stripe layer of the candy cane dies there that I cut out in the pattern paper to match the mat, and then I'm going to put some tape runner behind the panel. Sometimes I put a little bit on the twine as well. This one seems like it's going to stay in place, and there's tape runner on both sides, so it should trap it in there. Last but not least, I am going to add some foam tape to that candy cane to pop it off the background. Since that background is so fun and busy, I do want our candy cane to kind of pop up and be dimensional and also stand out even more. So now it's time to cut those tails just a little bit because I don't want to cover up the tags that I've added to this card. This was such a fun card to create between the heat embossing, the tags, and the candy cane. For this next card, I'm going to use a combination of the Fancy Frames dies and the dotted scallop cover die. Now, this cover die does not cut out the A2 panel, it cuts out the scallop design. So you can either use it and then cut out an A2 panel out of it, or you can cut out a shape like an A2 panel or something else and then use the scallop on top. I'm also going to use the Winter's Wispy Trees dies, which have the cute little wispy trees, a sentiment, some snowflakes, and the dies to match. I'm using some Stamp Market Cube inks today. First I started with Breeze, then I moved on to Apple. I'm also using Party Pink and Salmon. And I know these are non-traditional colors. I really love them on Christmas cards though. I think this 4 combination just makes me very happy around Christmas time because lots of things get really dark and I really like the bright, fresh, modern colors. I did cut out a smaller Fancy Frames die out of that scalloped cover panel die and then a larger one to pop the scalloped one on top of. So that's going to be kind of the central focus of my card. I do have some pattern paper cut down to 4 by 5 1/4 on top of an A2 piece of white cardstock. I cut out the winter wishes with the die from the Wispy Trees, and then I cut all the trees out as well. And the reason that it's really nice to have the dies even with the sentiments is because then you can pop it up. So I have several layers of dimension here, and it's so easy to create with just some foam tape or foam squares. So that's one of the reasons why I always like to get the dies if they are available for a stamp set. And that is just such a quick and easy card, but such a different look. And I love how fresh and bright it is. For this next card, I'm going to show you how I cut the dotted scallops out of an A2 piece of cardstock. So I have my A2 piece of cardstock. I'm going to put it right in the inside of the cut lines of the die, and then I'm going to put some washi tape or purple tape around one of the corners, kind of wrapping it like a present would wrap around that corner. When I run it through, then I peel off that tape and you can see that the entire A2 panel has been cut with that pattern of scallop dies. And since the tape is on the back of the paper, it doesn't even matter if it kind of tears a little bit. It didn't tear, but just if it does, it doesn't matter because it's on the back. I'm going to use my Spellbinders tool in one just to poke out the ones that didn't come out. I didn't use my metal plate, my metal shim for that. They would have fallen out a lot easier just with flicking if I had used my shim. Okay, this is the Let's Be Merry stamp set and dies. You can either use the dies with the shadow die or you can use the stamp with the shadow die. So I'm going to use the stamp because I'm going to do both some colorful inking and some heat embossing on top. I am again going with Apple. I just love this green. I think it's so pretty and, like I said, so fresh and modern. For Christmas time, it's just a unique green color, and I love the way it looks with that big sentiment. Then I'm going to pour some rainbow sparkle embossing powder right on top. So I did not let it dry too very long because it is not an embossing ink. It is just the dye ink, but it does stay wet enough for long enough that you can heat emboss it as well. So I am just pouring that embossing powder on top. I'm not so worried about the excess around the edges because I think it's like kind of a clear with rainbow sparkles in it, so I think it's okay even if it's around the letters as well, but just check that out. It adds so much fun to that green that's already so pretty. So I'm going to hold the die in place with some tape and run it through my die cut machine. Again, getting those dies is so nice, especially with that outline or shadow that lets you cut out the entire sentiment. I put a little bit of tape runner behind all of the scallops that were not open, and then I got it a little wrong. There was a little bit of red sticking out, so I just put it into my trimmer. That's why I like that little guillotine trimmer, because it really helps you cut those little edges off very easily. This is that We Are Memory Keepers hole punch, which allows you to cut different sizes of holes this has been a game changer for me because I don't like having a bajillion and one hole punches. So I really like having that one handy and just using it for all the different tag sizes or holes that I need to punch for tags and things like that. For these tags, I just decided to put them underneath. I popped up the Oh Let's Be Merry on foam tape and I'm just sticking them underneath. I was going to wrap them in twine, but then it was kind of covering up the sentiment. So what I decided to do was wrap the twine around the sentiment. Since it's on foam tape, I can wrap it around the bottom and tie the bow at the top. So you get the effect of having the twine with the tags, even though they're not through the tag holes at all. That twine is just around that sentiment. Again, super, super simple, easy to put together. For this next card, we're going to use the Merry and Magical stamps and dies. Again, love the dies with the sentiments. There's also dies for that large snowflake and some other elements in the stamp set. So I stamped Merry and Magical in embossing ink and I heat embossed it. I'm using silver embossing powder this time because I'm going to do kind of a frosty, wintry look for this card. This is the So Many Snowflakes cover die. This die cuts out the A2 rectangle and all of the snowflakes in between. Since it's such tiny spots, I'm using liquid glue, it's Ultra Bond from Thermoweb, to adhere it down to some foil paper from Memory Box. Then I cut out the snowflakes from the Snow Flurries dies. The large one I cut out of some pink cardstock and the small one I cut out of the Stamp Market's Diamond Glitter cardstock, which I have been hoarding but I needed to use for this snowflake. And they layer on top of each other beautifully, or you can use them on their own. There's also a rosette die that you can use them with that's separate. But this, again, super, super simple to put together, but look at all that shine and those frosty colors. For this next card, I'm using the Sweet Holiday Wishes stamps and dies. You can see there are 2 candy canes and 4 little peppermint candies, and then there's a little fa la la sentiment. So I want to stamp all of these at least once. A couple will get 2. I'm using my mini Misty and I'm using some white cardstock, and I'm going to use some colors that I feel like are represented in the pattern papers because I'm going to use some of those. So I'm using, let's see, it's Cherry Kisses for that bright red, and then I'm also using some salmon because I noticed some salmon in that pattern paper as well. So I messed up the second candy cane there. You can see at the bottom, I got too much ink on there and I just wasn't careful enough. So I'm going to do the layers backwards. I'm going to do the thin little stripes first, and then I'm going to do the thicker stripes in green. They're very easy to line up either way. I just was being too quick and got too much ink on the stamp. So with this type of dye ink, you really only need to tap, tap, tap pretty gently. I don't know if you've noticed, but because of the foam pads, you don't need to press down on the ink pad because it will just squeeze out a little bit too much ink. So you can see there, I did get it finally right. I just needed to be a little more patient and slow down. I'm going to take a picture of this because I think I want it in that kind of order and I need to glue everything down. I use this method a lot because I like to move things around for a while. I don't always show that in a video because it really does take me some time to figure out exactly where I want everything. But then once I get it right and I'm ready to glue things down, I do often take a picture with my phone and then just leave it to the left-hand side so that I can work on it. And I've popped up the candy canes double pop up. Everything else has been pretty much only popped up in a single layer, and then the pattern papers are flat to the card. Again, so easy, so much fun to create this card. For this card, I'm going to use the Joyful Blooms stamps and dies, and then some really rich jewel tone colors that I found in one of the pattern papers and I thought would be fun to stamp with. So I used fuchsia for this first layer. I'm going to use navy with this second layer, and then for the leaves I used jade. For this flower I used cobalt. This flower has 2 stamps that layer, and I wanted to make sure I put the second layer in the right spot. So I just put the die on top just to see where exactly it was going to cut, and that made it easy for me to to line up that stamp where it was supposed to go. The third one goes inside the petals. That's not a problem. When you have new stamps, if you're not getting a completely clean image the first time you stamp, maybe try using a little embossing ink on top and then just rubbing it off with your hand. You can see there I got a much cleaner image with one stamp rather than trying to double or triple stamp it. This stamp is also 2 layers, so I really needed to put the die in place to see where the second layer was supposed to go. So I lined up the die on the stamped image, and now I'm putting the second stamp on top and then picking it up with my MISTI and removing that die and then stamping that second layer. This is a really easy way to do it for me. You can also die cut the image and then place it back in the negative and stamp it that way. I found this to be very simple to do this way. This is the Sending Cheer stamps and dies. I love the flourishes and swirls that are on these images, and of course the dies to cut them all out is great to have. So I am going to stamp Sending Cheer on some white cardstock, and I heat emboss it with some gold embossing powder. And I chose the gold because I felt like it went with the warm, rich colors that I had been stamping the flowers in. So this was another one where I wasn't sure where I was going to put everything, but after a little bit of fiddling, I just kind of went for it. So I have one of the leaves with one of the flowers, and then I'm going to pop up the Sending Cheer. I'm going to pop up that leaf, and it was this guy that I just couldn't figure out where to put. So I put it on with some tape runner, and then I lifted up the panel just a little bit so that I could trim off anything that was excess hanging over the 4 by 5 1/4 white panel on that really pretty pattern paper in the background that was kind of the inspiration for the colors in this card. I just added some enamel dots from the stamp market, and just another really fun, easy card to create. For this card, I'm going to use some Easy Cut adhesive, which is that thin adhesive sheet. I'm going to pull off a back protective layer and lay it on some black cardstock. What you want to do is have at least 2 edges that you're lining it up with. It just makes it a little bit easier to cover up the cardstock and make sure that you have adhesive all over the back. Just cut off the excess adhesive and the excess cardstock so you know you can die cut all over this square. I'm using the Just Believe layering dies. I cut out the really skinny, fine, beautiful sentiment in the black with the easy cut behind it. So it's already got adhesive behind it, and I cut out the shadow layer in white. And I know black and white is not always a traditional Christmas colors, but I really do like them in that like buffalo plaid black and white. Looks great for Christmas. So I'm going to try this and see how it looks on some pattern paper. I do love how the Believe is cut into the B and the E leave is separate. It just makes it a lot easier to line up. And after that, I am just going to put some tape runner behind a 4 by 5 1/4 piece of that diagonal pattern paper that I love so much with all of the colors included. And then I am going to stack several of the shadow layer dies. It just says the Just Believe, but it's just the shadow layer, and I'm using liquid adhesive to stack them up. This is just a really easy way to get some dimension and not have to worry about trying to cut out tiny little pieces of foam behind it. And I did use the liquid glue to adhere it down to the pattern paper as well. I was going to add more, but I love this just as it is. This is a huge and beautiful release. Did you have a favorite today? I'd love to hear about it down in the comments below. Don't forget to check out the rest of my Get a Jump on Christmas series. I'm going to link to the whole thing over here. As always, I want to thank you so much for spending time with me today. Please stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll see you again soon. Nope, do that every single time. From the top. They were kind enough to send me a whole... One more time.